Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that you have scheduled this hearing as early into this particular Congress as you have. As you note, it's an exceptionally important issue for many of our states and truly a priority here. The federal compensation programs that we're talking about today, whether secure rural schools or payment in lieu of taxes, have been extraordinarily valuable in our rural communities, certainly in my state of Alaska. I know that these programs are important to you, certainly to you, Senator Baucus, and I also appreciate your leadership and your efforts as we have tried to find the dollars necessary to continue the very important funding. We're going to count on you once again to help us out with that, but we recognize the challenges, and I would certainly concur with the chairman here that we need to find longer-term solutions so that we don't go from year to year. The anxiety, the stress that I hear from my communities, the community of Wrangell, where I went to elementary school, is a community where 64% of their budget for the school comes from Secure Rural Schools funding. When they don't know where 64% of their budget is going to be coming from on a year-to-year basis, it causes a great deal of stress. I want to mention first the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program. The PILT program, of course, is permanent, so we're not concerned about the program expiring, but what we are concerned about is the level at which the program is funded. Over the last several years, when we reauthorized and extended Secure Rural Schools, we also turned PILT into a mandatory funded program. And I think this was primarily done to build the political support to reauthorize and extend Secure Rural Schools. PILT was created in 1976 by Congress because we changed our federal land policy from one that was focused on disposal to one that was focused on retention. These payments are literally payments in lieu of taxes to compensate our local governments for the loss in tax revenue caused by this change in policy. And how PILT is funded in the future, whether programmatic changes are needed, and its relationship to Secure Rural Schools are certainly something that we need to explore. Secure Rural Schools, unlike PILT, was largely a replacement program for the receipt sharing programs, whether it's the Forest Service payments to states and the Bureau of Management that Oregon and California have for their payments. These payments made under these programs were historically from receipts generated by timber sales for roads and school purposes. But I think we recognize that they were never intended to be a permanent entitlement program, but more specifically a temporary, short-term bridge to allow the communities to transition to the new economic reality that was forced upon them by environmental policies that were designed to halt timber harvesting. But if you're a community like Ketchikan, where I was born down in southeast Alaska, Ketchikan, their private taxable lands within the Ketchikan Gateway Borough are 0.3%. 0.3%. So if you have no other place to go, if 96.5% of the land in your borough is held by the federal government, the state has 1.3%, the local government has 0.3%, there is 0.3% that is taxable land. So when you say you've got this federal policy that says you can't harvest within the Tongass because we're just saying you can't harvest in the Tongass, and you have no place to go for your tax base, and we say, well, this is just going to be a temporary program for you until you can transition. The question is, what do you transition to? Where do you go? And of course, Chief Tidwell and I have had many, many conversations about where we go from there. But our counties, our boroughs, our other communities have received payments for more than a decade now. For some of your counties in Oregon and Washington, Northwest California, who received the spotted owl payments, they've been seeing these Secure Rural Schools payments for more than 2 decades. And now again, we're talking about the need for another short-term extension. But I think we all know, I mean, we're having budget conversations this week. It's on everybody's mind. Federal government's broke here. We can't continue to pay counties to not utilize the lands within their boundaries. And, Mr. Chairman, you have appropriately suggested where we need to go with this. You need to be able to access the resources that are on your lands. We either need to utilize our federal lands to generate the revenue and the jobs for our rural communities, or we should divest the federal government of those lands and let the states or the counties, the boroughs, manage them. And, Mr. Chairman, you've suggested that that probably isn't going to enjoy support within the Congress. Maybe that's true, but boy, oh boy, you've got to have something here. You've got to have some way for these communities to survive. Otherwise, I think they do go the way that you have suggested that they might, which is to turn into ghost towns. And that's not a solution that I think is one that we would support. We do need to address head-on the fact that federally owned land has a profound impact on the fiscal and economic base of a community as well as the social fabric. So we've got a good panel here this morning. I appreciate that we're led off by Senator Baucus on this issue. But, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you, with Senator Landrieu, and so many others as we try to find a longer-term solution for these communities in these rural areas that are impacted so profoundly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just do